something strange happens when people talk about great musicians. They talk about talent, they talk about genius, they talk about giftedness, but they almost never talk about the most uncomfortable fact. Many of the greatest musicians in history couldn't read music, or barely could, not in the way modern musicians are trained to. Errol Garner couldn't really read scores. Wes Montgomery didn't rely on notation. Django Reinhardt didn't work from written systems. Louis Armstrong learned by listening, copying, and surviving on stage. And no, this does not mean they were uneducated. It means something far more dangerous. They had no safety net, no charts they could instantly pull up, no authoritative transcription to confirm every note, no explanation telling them what was correct before they played it. They had to decide in real time what sounded right. And if they decided wrong, everyone heard it. There was no pause button, no rewind, no undo. That environment did something to them. It forced ability to form, because when you cannot rely on external structure, your internal judgment has to grow. Now, here is where the story usually gets distorted. Take Joe Pass. In modern music schools, Joe Pass is often presented as the ultimate system. His chord melody approach, his harmonic substitutions, his walking bass logic, his voice leading, all of it is analyzed, labeled, packaged, and then taught. And this is the mistake, because Joe Pass did not become Joe Pass by learning a Joe Pass system. He became Joe Pass by spending decades playing in bars, studios, backup gigs, and situations where mistakes were public and unforgiving. By the time he was being analyzed, his ability had already fully formed. Academia looked at the result and mistook it for the cause. So students were taught the vocabulary without the pressure that created it, the explanation without the environment, the map without the terrain. This misunderstanding didn't just affect how Joe Pass was taught. It reshaped the modern jazz education entirely. Modern jazz education didn't fail because it taught theory. It failed because it reversed the order of learning. Young musicians are trained to analyze first, to explain first, to understand first. They are rewarded for correctness, for clarity, for precision, and quietly punished for risk. They learn how to avoid bad notes long before they learn how to recover from them, so they become incredibly competent inside safe boundaries and strangely fragile outside them. You hear it immediately. Everything is clean, everything is controlled, everything is correct, and almost nothing is urgent. Because real ability doesn't come from knowing what should happen. It comes from deciding what must happen when nothing is certain. The older masters didn't just choose not to read music. Often, they simply couldn't. They couldn't find the chart. They couldn't ask for clarification. They couldn't stop the band and analyze the form. The music kept going, and they either went with it or disappeared. Now, compare that to today. Today, any song, any standards, any transcription, any reharmonization is available instantly. Multiple keys, multiple fingerings, nothing is missing anymore. And that is exactly the problem, because when nothing is missing, nothing inside you needs to grow. Modern musicians don't lack information, they lack pressure. They don't have to judge. They just have to reference. They don't have to commit. They just have to confirm. And the more perfect that the reference becomes, the weaker judgment gets. That's why so many players today can explain everything and yet sound interchangeable, clean, correct, careful, and easily replaceable. Now, here's where this stops being about music, because the exact same thing is happening with language learning. Think about how languages used to be learned. You were thrown into it. You didn't understand most of what you heard. You guessed. You misused words. You embarrassed yourself. You adjusted. You learned by surviving communication. This isn't about someone else. This is about you. You've already truly mastered a language, your mother tongue. And now, you are learning a second one. Today, we reversed the process. First, you get a textbook, then the explanations, then the grammar rules, then the analysis. And finally, you are told to practice speaking. That's exactly like studying music theory for years before ever playing with a band. So, when it's time to speak, you freeze. Because you were trained to analyze, not to decide. You were trained to avoid mistakes, not to recover from them. You were trained to wait for certainty, not to act under uncertainty. That's why the words don't come out. Not because you don't know enough, but because your judgment muscle was never forced to grow. The old masters didn't become great despite lacking resources. They became great because they lack of them. They couldn't find the chart or transcription, so they had to find the music. Today, we can find everything instantly, and that convenience is quietly destroying ability. Technology didn't make us worse musicians or worse language learners. It made us safer. And safety is the enemy of real ability. Because ability is not built by understanding more. It is built by being forced to act before understanding arrives. And when the world removes that force, ability stops forming. That's the real cost of convenience. And we are only beginning to see it at this point. If you truly understand all of this, you might want to ask me for a method to master a second language, to see how it is different from what others tell you. Then I can give you one line. There is only one way to truly master a second language. There is no other way. The only real way to master a second language is to imitate as closely as possible the path through which you mastered your mother tongue. You say you can't go back to the delivery room. That's true. But based on decades of observation and practice, I can tell you this first. Apart from reading and writing, the only way to recreate something closest to mother tongue acquisition for listening and speaking is to watch films and TV shows in the language you want to learn. And remember this clearly. Do not turn on subtitles in your mother tongue. In fact, do not turn on any subtitles at all. Try it first. The moment you try, you will realize something. You can't understand a single sentence. That's exactly right. Isn't that identical to the state of a newborn? And here is the difference. Next, you will want to escape, because understanding nothing is genuinely uncomfortable. Yes, the acquisition of any ability is always accompanied by discomfort. What happens next is very simple. Whoever does not run away will truly master this new language. I don't know about others, but newborns never run away because they can't. When they don't understand and can't communicate, they cry. You can cry too, but after crying, you still have to continue.